Hey everybody, a lot to talk about, so let's get going. I want to start with, I hardly know where to start, but let me just start with this. Donald Trump has fumbled the ball twice as far as I'm concerned. I want to get into that and a few other things as well. I just want to point out that I believe I have been consistent over the years about Donald Trump. Now, you've got at least half of Congress, and maybe, I don't think it's half the country, but a lot of Americans who just loathe Donald Trump. You saw this on display at his recent joint session speech, and I've talked about that before, so I don't want to get back into that. But, I mean, you see half of the Congress that absolutely hate Donald Trump. They loathe him. They are seething with hatred toward him. They're frothing at the mouth. It does not matter what he does. It does not matter what he says. No matter if it's for the betterment of the country, it does not matter. They just hate him. He could, as I've said, announce that he's got the cure for cancer tomorrow, and it wouldn't matter. They just sit on their hands. I have kind of prided myself on being what I believe is objective about Donald Trump. I do not hate Donald Trump. I believe I can be objective about him and fair-minded about him. I can applaud him when he is correct, and I will talk about when he is wrong. And unfortunately, he's not having a good week as far as I'm concerned, because he has dropped the ball a couple of times, and that's what I want to talk about right now. And the first thing I want to talk about is this continuing resolution, the CR, which passed in the House of Representatives yesterday, or maybe it was the day before yesterday. At night, they passed this thing. Just a little background. A continuing resolution simply means we're going to pass this resolution so that the government can continue to function. In other words, we're trying to avert a government shutdown. Now, the thought of that doesn't bother me, as you know. But whatever the case, they've got to keep the government going, and so they have to, and time is running out, so they have to pass a continuing resolution to keep the government funded. And of course, the devil's always in the details, and these things are always full of spending. What I have maintained, folks, is simply this. The time to strike is now in terms of cutting wasteful spending, eliminating entire departments. Some of this is being done. Spending cuts are not being done. Over here, you've got the Doge cuts, or the Doge discoveries, if you will. And to his credit, Trump has apparently told Education Secretary Linda McMahon to shut the department down. And I've seen where they've already laid off half of the employees. That is a good thing. That's a very good thing. We need to do that to a few other departments. But in terms of actual cutting of government spending, we're just not seeing that. This continuing resolution simply keeps our spending at present levels. Need I remind you that we have a debt of over $35 trillion. Folks, we're heading for the cliffs. And this has got to be dealt with, and the time to deal with it is now. Why? Because we have the House, we have the Senate, and we have the presidency. We have the majority. The Republicans have the majority, but they're not doing anything to cut government spending, as this CR demonstrates. It is maddening, because what's going to happen, folks, if things don't change, history shows that in the midterm elections, the GOP is probably going to lose the House unless something unusual happens. If you use the past as a predictor for the future, in all likelihood, as things stand right now, the Democrats would take over the House. The Republicans may maintain the Senate, and obviously we'd have the executive branch, but that's the end of any attempt at cutting spending whatsoever. It's got to happen now. But it's not going to happen, apparently, as long as Mike Israel First Johnson is the Speaker of the House. Why get rid of Nancy Pelosi to just replace her with Mike Johnson? Why get rid of Kevin McCarthy? Why get rid of John the crying drunk Boehner? I mean, how is Johnson any different? As a matter of fact, he may be even worse. The spending is not the spending is not being dealt with. We're not seeing cuts. This continuing resolution simply keeps things at their present levels. Only one single solitary man in the House of Representatives stood up and said, no, we're not going to pass this CR. They did, of course, because he's only one man. And of course, I'm talking about Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie, who has done his part to fill the shoes of Dr. Ron Paul, as far as I'm concerned. Massie apparently is the only one in the House of Representatives currently that's got any sense and understands that this problem has got to be dealt with and dealt with now. And this is why he voted against the continuing resolution. And for this, he was mercilessly attacked from Republicans, including Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is wrong about this, folks. You may have seen his statement attack. I wish I'd pulled it up, but I forgot to pull it up. Donald Trump went on Truth Social, and it was shared with other social media outlets, where he basically just absolutely attacked Thomas Massie, this good and decent, principled man, a small government advocate. And Donald Trump went so far as to say that somebody has got to primary Thomas Massie, and whoever decides to do it is going to have my full support. Mr. Trump, you are wrong, sir. There is no greater friend to the cause of liberty and freedom and fiscal sanity than Thomas Massie. And I got news for Donald Trump. This is not the first time this has been tried. Thomas Massie is very popular in the state of Kentucky, or the Commonwealth if you prefer. I don't know what the future holds for him. There are rumors and rumbles out there that he may run for Mitch McConnell's Senate seat, or that he may run for the governor of the state. I don't know, or maybe he'll stay where he is. But this much I do know. Should he decide to run for re-election to his current seat as the incumbent, Donald Trump is in for a surprise. This has been tried before, and without success. Thomas Massie won his re-election against he won his primary against Republican opposition with like over 70% of the vote. His opponent got in the low 20s. It was he obliterated his opponent. What Trump doesn't understand is that Massie's constituents love him, and they are all for him. And I predict that if Donald Trump goes through with this, he's going to have egg on his face at the next election if Massie runs for re-election, as he should. Folks, Massie is right about this. We have got to get a grip on the spending. We cannot continue the way we have been going. We've got to deal with this now. This is business as usual. This is a Pelosi move. This is a McCarthy move. And now it's Mike Israel First Johnson making this move. I mean, I thought he's supposed to be some good conservative, fiscal conservative from Louisiana. Of course, he is nothing of the sort whatsoever. So Trump is wrong about this. I say this with no malice or hatred. I'm not frothing at the mouth. Trump is just wrong about this. And Massie finally responded on Twitter with this quote. Let me read it to you. He said simply this with regard to this situation. Quote, do the 12 separate bills so the shutdown is off the table and spending can be adjusted down. Cut 5% or even 1% across the board. Quit funding programs that expose quit funding programs that Doge exposed, unquote. That's the answer. It's as simple as that. You know, the motivation on the part of the Republicans, like Johnson, is we got to pass this continuing resolution to keep the government open. So Massey is simply saying, take that off the table, make it a separate deal, and then give us 12 separate bills so that the shutdown is off the table. In other words, vote for these things separately. That's the solution. It's simple. What's the bottom line? The bottom line is the Republicans in the House of Representatives don't want to cut spending, folks. That's just the bottom line. And for his principled stand, Massey gets attacked by his Republicans and his president. So what's the upshot of all this? The upshot of all this, the conclusion is, we're just not going to see spending cuts from the Republicans. It's just not going to happen. That's all I can conclude. It's got to happen, but it's not going to happen. You understand, what DOGE is exposing is good. It's exposing waste and fraud and overspending and corruption that we can deal with and get rid of. That's good. But folks, that's just playing around the edges. We've got to have actual substantial cuts in government spending. Instead, what we get from Mike Israel First Johnson is another CR. What's going to happen in a year? Are we going to have another CR? Or are we going to finally get a grip and do something about the spending? No, we'll have another CR. That's just how they roll in Washington, folks. And it's not the Democrat. Of course, every single Democrat voted for this, which tells you all you need to know. And every single Republican voted for it, except one man with some sanity in Washington in the House of Representatives. Donald Trump is wrong about this. And people need to understand, and you've got these sycophants for Donald Trump on Twitter, such as Laura Loomer and good old Cat Turd, if you follow Cat Turd, who is attacking Thomas Massey mercilessly. So it's even apparently sane Republicans who are going after Massey. Folks, this is one of those times when the crowd is wrong and the one man who's got the guts to stand up to the crowd is right. I know that feeling. But this is where we are. Thomas Massey is right about this. And his constituents in Kentucky know he's right about this. And they're going to, I predict, they're going to throw some eggs at Donald Trump at the next election. And he's going to understand he shouldn't have done what he did. He was absolutely wrong to do this. All right. Here's another fumble from Trump. You know, I want to love this man so much, and so many things he does I do love. Personally, not that I know him personally, but personally, I love Donald Trump. I think he's a good man. He's done really well for himself. I'd love to be his next door neighbor. But man, when it comes to matters of policy, sometimes he drives me nuts. He does so with his attack on Massey and his refusal to do what has to be done in terms of fiscal sanity. I've said all along, that's my big beef with Trump is fiscal matters, basically. You know, he's all in for, apparently, for tax cuts, and that's wonderful. I'm all for that too. But you've got to cut spending. Folks, let's face the facts. Donald Trump spent more money than Barack Obama did when he was president the first time. This cannot continue. Nobody else, no state or no person has a printing press where we can just print money like the federal government can. That's fantasy land. That's not real life. And sooner or later, it's gonna come home to roost. You can't keep printing money and spending wildly without eventually crashing. It's going to happen sooner or later. We are gambling with our future if we don't get a grip on spending. And by the way, if you can print money like they do at the Fed, why do any of us have to pay taxes? If you can just print money, why do you need ours? Right? I mean, is that not logical? Why do you need to pay taxes if they can just print money anytime they need it? Because that's exactly what they do. All right, let me move on to the ceasefire. This is another fumble by Donald Trump. Now, I am an advocate of talking. I'm an advocate of diplomacy. I'm an advocate of negotiation. I'm an advocate for getting the parties involved to end the war in Ukraine. I am for an end to the war in Ukraine. And the Trump administration had talks in Jeddah in the last few days. They've been talking for a while, which is good. I applaud that. Okay, I'm all for that. Interestingly, Zelensky was not at these talks. There were representatives from Ukraine, but I want to go down through what they were talking about in terms of a 30-day ceasefire that Ukraine has agreed to. Russia has not agreed to. Rubio is basically saying the ball is in Russia's court now. But I want to get into the details of the ceasefire and what they discussed, and let's talk about what Russia's response to this is going to do. It's going to be. Now, you got to remember, Russia is in the driver's seat here, folks. This is a war not between Russia and Ukraine. Let's be clear. This is a war between Russia and the United States. It's just that simple. It is a proxy war, but for all intents and purposes, this war is being fought from the Ukrainian side with American weapons. And there's no doubt that we have assets in Ukraine, CIA assets and what have you. This is basically a war between the United States and Russia. It is utter folly. Be that as it may, Russia is in the driver's seat. Time is on their side, and they are ultimately going to decide what happens here. Again, I applaud our efforts to try and get this thing resolved. But I want to reference my buddy Alexander Christoforou and what he said on Twitter with regard to the ceasefire, the details of the ceasefire. And he says this. Let me repeat what Alex said. The talks in Jeddah are not really negotiations. The U.S. is on record in being in a proxy war with Russia. Yesterday was the U.S. and its proxy sitting down to agree to the terms they would deliver to Russia. They settled on the Macron-Starmer no-fly plan. This is the plan they decided to go with. Russia can accept or reject these terms. They can also decide to counter and present their own terms to the U.S., and more negotiations follow. There is a very small possibility that Putin agrees to the U.S. terms. Don't rule this out. Most likely, Russia will reject these terms and counter-offer, which is what I predict they'll do because, again, they are in the driver's seat. Trump is threatening huge sanctions, crashing oil, etc., U.S. military escalation, long-range strikes. Will Russia blink? No, they won't. Trump will push to meet with Xi, contact Modi, pressure SA, Brazil, put pressure to break apart BRICS, and global South support for Russia. This is what Alex is saying. He says, watch Elon Musk's post on Twitter. See if he turns up the propaganda pressure against Russia in the next couple of days. The U.S. will play to their strengths, the only card they really hold, the InfoWar space, which is Russia's big weakness. Russia will be painted as the party that turns down peace. That's true. Keep in mind that Russia has made its conditions for a ceasefire public since at least June of 24. The Western media will completely ignore this fact, as they always do. The U.S., the European Union, the UK, and NATO are now in sync when it comes to Project Ukraine. He says, do not trust Erdogan. He will betray Russia. Keep an eye on developments in Romania. A lot going on there. Trump will speak with Putin most likely this Friday. Outside chance that Putin convinces Trump to see things in terms of Istanbul Plus. Pressure reverses back towards Zelensky and the EU, UK. Outside chance, but possible, that this swings again in the opposite direction. Trump, the person, has no real understanding how to end this. He is making things up as they come. And finally, and this is key, folks, and this cannot be avoided, Trump now owns this. Ukraine now is Trump's war. That's a fact. This isn't Biden's war any longer. Biden's gone. This is Trump's war. Do you remember back before he was reelected how Trump would repeatedly say that he would have this war ended? At times he said, I'll have it ended in 24 hours. I'll probably have it ended even before I become president. That didn't happen, did it? I think maybe he's bit off a little bit more than he can chew. I reiterate to you, Russia is in the driver's seat. I was hoping that Trump would simply write this one off and get us out of there, which is what he should do. What I believe needs to happen in negotiations, and this is probably what Russia is waiting for, Ukraine is going to have to surrender, and they're going to have to cede the territory that Russia rightfully has regained. That's what this was all about from the get-go. That's the only way this ends, as far as I'm concerned, from the perspective of Russia. This thing could end within a very short period of time. I predict that Russia is going to reject this ceasefire until the conditions are more favorable to Putin. Now, the big question is Trump, who has a really large ego, is he going to just swallow his pride and meet with Putin and try for once to understand Russia's perspective on this war? How I wish that Trump could sit down with Colonel McGregor or Mearsheimer or Professor Jeffrey Sachs so that he could understand things from a perspective that is not Marco Rubio's. We're in a no-win situation, and we shouldn't be in this situation, folks. We definitely should not be in a situation that pits us against Russia. There's no reason for this. This whole thing started, as you know, when the CIA toppled the legitimate Ukrainian government years ago and installed our puppet. And eventually we wound up with this dictator, Zelensky, who has suspended elections and imprisoned Christians, as you know, outlawed churches in his country. And we're supposed to be having democracy in Ukraine. Trump needs to cut his losses and get us out of this. Folks, we've got enough problems at home to deal with. I am sick and tired of this whole Ukraine fiasco. We can sit down and negotiate and have diplomacy, but Trump needs to realize, Trump needs to get over his ego, do what he can to save face. Maybe Putin can help him, and facilitate an end to the fighting in a way that is, I'm not saying Russia can't make concessions to some degree, but Trump needs to understand what Russia's terms are and then meet them as much as he can. Get Putin to sign off, get Zelensky to sign off, and then get us out and get this thing over with. This thing, in theory, is simple enough. But Trump's got to swallow his pride on this deal, folks. I think that he fears that it's going to be seen as a loss on his behalf, and he just can't stomach that idea. I mean, you know how he is, but this is a no-win situation for the United States. This is a no-win situation, and it's a situation we shouldn't even be involved in. We never should have gone into the first place. That wasn't Trump's fault. But Trump owns this now, folks. And this is not the time to be the tough guy with Putin. This is a time to be reasonable and rational and understand Putin is in the driver's seat and respond to that accordingly. Then hammer out a deal that Putin will agree to and get it over with. That's the best way to go forward as far as I'm concerned. Let me move on. I want to mention briefly, we've seen the genocide of Christians and non-Christians in Palestine by Israel, by this genocidal maniac, Benjamin Netanyahu. We've seen that with full support of the United States. And again, for the 1,000th time, we have Christians in America who do not understand what is happening to their fellow Christians in Palestine at the hands of the Zionists. You just can't get them to understand that, many of them, because still in their minds, Israel is God's chosen land. It doesn't matter, I could list for you atrocity after atrocity after atrocity that these people are committing on Christians, both in Israel and in Palestine, the land of Christ, and it just doesn't move them. They just don't give a damn, basically. Their own Christian brethren being martyred, paraded through the streets in Israel, women being degraded and raped and murdered in the streets, and their children by the Zionists. And Christians in America can't even bat an eye. Now it's happening in Syria, as predicted by so many, with the removal of Assad in Syria. Now the gloves are off, and you're seeing again an utter massacre of Christians in Syria at the hands of Islamic radicals. This is another example of what happens with American foreign policy. And it begs the question, what does the United States have against Christians around the world? Because everything we do, the end result of everything we do seemingly is the absolute persecution and massacre of Christians in Palestine, in Israel, and now in Syria. Because we would not back Assad, who is not a Christian. He had to flee to go get political asylum in Russia, where Christians can openly practice their faith, of course. How ironic is that, right? But Assad he protected Christians in Syria, and now he's gone, and now we've got a bloodbath. Predictably. Same thing happened with Gaddafi in Libya, thanks to Hillary Clinton. We remove these people from power, and the end result is utter chaos. And that's where we are in Syria right now. Let me move on. Folks, I've had it up to here. My patience is at an end with Pam Bondi. I'm done with Pam Bondi. I didn't like the fact that Trump made her Attorney General in the first place, because she is a deep stater as far as I'm concerned. She is a DeSantis ally as far as I'm concerned. I've had it with Pam Bondi because I have seen nothing. Where are the arrests? Where are the Epstein files? You're still sitting on them, Pam Bondi. And I've heard a dirty little secret through the grapevine that even Kash Patel has had it with her. Do you realize reports are that Kash Patel has a direct line now, like a bat phone with Donald Trump? He doesn't go through Bondi anymore. He goes straight to Trump. Where are the names on the Epstein files? Where are the JFK files? Where are the RFK files? Where are the MLK files? Pam Bondi, where the hell are these things? And where the hell are the arrests? Where are the perp walks? Why have you arrested nobody yet? Do your job or get out and let somebody that can do your job in. Oh my goodness, I've had it with Pam Bondi. Man, I got so much to talk about. Oh, I got to cover this. Have you heard about the AutoPen, folks? The AutoPen? Have you heard about this? You know all those executive orders that Biden bum rushed through On his final days in office, he pardoned Hunter, and he pardoned all the J6ers like Liz Cheney, and he pardoned this one, and I think he pardoned everybody in America except me and Donald Trump. I can't. It was just mass pardons. Well, apparently, all those pardons and a lot of executive orders from his time in office were signed with an AutoPen. A pen that wasn't actually in Joe Biden's feeble, shaking hand. It was signed with an AutoPen, and when they were signed in the White House with an AutoPen, Joe Biden was not in the White House. When he reportedly signed all of these pardons in the White House, he was physically in St. Croix. In other words, it was impossible for him to have signed these pardons and a lot of these executive orders because he wasn't even in the country, for heaven's sakes. He was down in the Bahamas on the beach eating ice cream, wondering what his name was. Now, this is a scandal, don't you think? What are the implications? What are the ramifications for the pardons and the executive orders being signed with an AutoPen? In other words, if Biden didn't sign him, and apparently he did not because he physically wasn't there, which means it would be impossible for him to sign these documents, which begs the question, if he didn't, who did? I'll tell you who did. Somebody who wasn't the president, which would invalidate everything he signed, would it not? Who has the authority to sign a presidential pardon? Well, it ain't the chief of staff, and it ain't the first lady, and it ain't the press secretary, who probably didn't know how to write anyway. Am I wrong about this? Executive orders have to be signed by the president. Presidential pardons have to be signed by the... Wait, let me think. I know this. Don't tell me. I've got this. Oh, yeah, that's right. They got to be signed by the president, who, even if an AutoPen is being used, has to have his fingers attached to said pen, does he not? This is scandalous. Apparently, Biden did not sign any of these documents. So the question is, does that mean that the pardons he signed are now invalid? That the executive orders he signed are now invalid? Does it mean that Hunter actually isn't pardoned? Does it mean that Liz Cheney isn't actually pardoned? Does it mean that Dr. Fauci isn't actually pardoned? Of course, with Pam Bondi as Attorney General, it probably doesn't matter anyway. But the point is, if Biden didn't physically sign these documents, the question would be, are they valid or not? I bet you know where I stand on this. Hell no, they're not valid. Now, I hope this is pursued by the powers that be so that all of these executive orders can be overturned. Well, Trump can overturn an executive order himself. But I'm thinking specifically of the pardons that Biden signed. If it can be shown that these pardons were signed with an AutoPen and Biden was not present when they were signed, that obviously means the president at the time did not sign them, and as far as I'm concerned, that makes them invalid, which means it's a brand new day in America in terms of who actually got a pardon. So let's keep our eyes on this and see what happens. All right, one more thing before I go. Guess who has left the country? You know, all of these Hollywood stars are famous. A lot of these Hollywood stars are famous for saying if Trump gets elected, I'm leaving America, and they never do. Well, you've got to give credit to one who actually kept her word. That's right, folks. We have lost a citizen. Rosie O'Donnell was true to her word, and Rosie has left America. My sympathies are with the people of the great land of Ireland because she's all yours. Rosie O'Donnell is not only moving to Ireland, but is apparently going to seek citizenship in that country. I'm fine with that. I just feel sorry for the Irish. But you're probably going to sell a lot of potatoes. A lot more potatoes. All right, folks, that's what's going on. Give me your comments down below. I appreciate it. Like this video if you would and subscribe to the channel. This is Trailer Trash Tim, and I'll see you soon.